All right, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. So if you've been following the evolution of this deck, what you're seeing before you now probably looks as different from the last video as the addition, as the transition to Esper from Bant looked in the previous video. So what's going on here? Well, a viewer on the channel left a comment about Shark Typhoon. And Shark Typhoon is a card you can cycle to put a XX Shark into play, where you have to spend a blue and a colorless to cycle it, and then X mana. And it's an interesting card. However, it got me, I thought, that is an interesting card. Let me try that out, because, I can hold up counter magic and then I can cycle it and start putting pressure. So I threw it in my deck, and what I found was that because the format is so mana tight, with the stifles and the wastelands and everything else that's going around, and the turns are very compressed, a lot of times you're just too busy to ever cycle the thing. So the best thing I was doing with it was Force of Willing with it. When I have a blue card like that I'm just forcing with all the time, then it's very questionable as to whether or not it needs to stay in the deck or should be staying in the deck. It might not be doing enough, right? Not to say that it's bad and that it couldn't make a return, but I think your deck has to be good at getting to a point where it's good, and I guess you'd have to have the right scenarios. They're sort of like living the dream with that card, where everything's perfect and you cycle it and you get a big thing, and then you just sit it behind a wall of permission and beat them down with it. But that's not significantly different than quite a few other cards that can do something similar, and I just didn't find it to be... It was a cool card with no purpose, right? Every card in the deck, I've said this before, has to have a purpose. It has to have... You should be able to... I should be able to point at one of the cards and say, this is in here to deal with this specific problem in the format, or to put pressure on this specific deck, which can be a challenge without having whatever the card is. I can do that with this build. What Shark Typhoon, however, did do for me, what that suggestion from the viewer did, was it got me thinking, hey, what would be good with Shark Typhoon when I initially tested it? And I thought, well, Standstill's great. I could just run that. So I tried Standstill out, and as I was reaching the conclusion that I didn't want to continue to play Shark Typhoon, I thought, well, is there anything else I can use? Well, Bowmasters is already really good. There's a wonderful sequence of just end step Bowmasters, untap, slam, Standstill is a great 1-2 punch. But particularly, I mean, even in that case, if you have to break it at some point, you wouldn't want to do this, but you could, in theory, break your own Standstill, dome them for 3, and then attack for 5, and so you can deal a total of 8 damage. Assuming you Bowmastered at the end of their turn for a ping, that would be 9 damage, and assuming you don't crack it right away, that's probably 11. So essentially what you can do is you can get in a situation with those 2 cards where Standstill can just be like a giant fire blast to your opponent's face. Typically you're not doing that. Typically you don't want to do that. You don't typically want to Ancestral your opponent, even with the Bowmasters out. But having the option is kind of cool, and of course... if you do have the threat out, almost always your opponent has to Ancestral you, which is what makes Standstill so cool. So I like that, but I thought, what else can I use with this? And obviously, I went back and just did internet research, and of course the answer was a no duh. How about this Enlightened Tutor that also makes giant things and is a major problem for control decks, which, of course, this is like playing a control deck. I mean, this deck right now is currently configured in such a way that it's like playing a control deck pre-sideboarded to beat other control decks, which is amazing in a lot of cases. So I went and tried Saga. I'd already had one Saga in the deck just as a little mini Enlightened Tutor type effect, and I just cranked it up, and I've loved the results. Now, this wouldn't work too well if Urza's Saga was not paired alongside the Lorien Reveals, because these are going to kill themselves, and then these are going to cycle off and give you replacement lands to fill in the gap. So you have a spell that's acting like a land, and a land that's a spell that's acting like a land over here, essentially together. It gives you enough mana to actually make this whole thing work. And also the tutor ability to just get Currency Converter is really strong. Because in a tight spot you can always start flipping through your deck faster and faster, digging for lands. Basically, it's an acceptable. Like, there's nothing there's nothing. Provided you have 2 mana, you can pretty much run the whole deck, is what I'm trying to say. So anyway, having said all that, I tried it out and it works extremely well. So the deck has hit, at least in practice sessions. I still intend to get into a tournament, but I'm still in this like hyper tuning stage. We're definitely homing in on the bullseye here though, and then I'll start doing tournaments. So we'll see how that goes. But in playtesting, at least, my win rate is between 80 and 90%. It's extraordinarily high. Although part of that, actually the 80% was when the meddling mages you see there were counter spells, and the 90% is with them as meddling mages. So that change, I think, is interesting one, and that came about in a couple of ways, and then we'll talk about a few of the other cards, and then we'll get into the games. So that change came about because there are a couple of cards that are just very counterspell resilient, but excellent to meddling mage. And in some cases, you can even exile these cards and there's nothing you can do. And one of the major threats in the format now is this guy, but that's not the one I'm talking about. This is Slime Against Humanity. This deck here is extremely hard to deal with if you don't have the right preparation. So the way this works, if you haven't seen it, it's a sorcery that lets you can play any number of these cards. It creates a 0/0 token with trample, and then you put X counters where X is 2, so it's always going to be at least a 2/2, plus the total number of cards you own in exile and in graveyard that are oozes or named Slime Against Humanity, which means this card will actually see itself. So it's a 3 mana 3/3, then a 4/4, then a 5/5. If you've played Hearthstone, these are the Jades essentially. So what people are doing though is they're pairing that up with Accelerate, all the usual like Ancient Tomb, City of Traders nonsense, as well as Chrome Mox and Elvish Spirit Guide. And then in that deck they run Trinisphere and Chalice of the Void, and then finally they run I forgot what it's called, but it's a 3 mana artifact that taps for a colorless that says if you start with it in your opening hand, you may exile your entire hand and you get a free mulligan back to 7, or whatever your mulligan number is. And so they pair it with that card because what they can do is then their deck runs like, I don't know, 15 of these or something. So what they can do is they can take the free mulligan, because that card exiles all the cards that are mulligan. It actually powers up Slime Against Humanity. So they can mulligan once or twice and then go first turn like Ancient Tomb, Lotus Petal, or Ancient Tomb, Chrome Mox, or Ancient Tomb, Elvish Spirit Guide, cast this thing, and have it pop out as like a 9/9 on turn 1. It's totally insane. And of course there are some decks that can just combo out and beat it, or do other things and beat it. But the question was, how does my control deck deal with that? Because even if I plow that thing, and let's say they play their next one and I force a will it or something, and then they play their next one and I counterspell it, at some point I'm not gonna always have a counterspell, and each time it's a 9/9, then a 10/10, then an 11/11, and it doesn't matter if I let's say I have like Leyline of the Void out, so these aren't even going to the graveyard. It doesn't matter, it checks exile, right? Regardless of where they go, there's no stopping the thing. So counter wasn't doing it, and I don't like having a gap in my defenses against a deck in the format. It just doesn't make sense in a control deck. You need to be anticipating. It's about playing the meta and understanding the meta, and then being prepared for what you're going to face. So the solution, I believe, is actually running Meddling Mage. Meddling Mage naming Slime Against Humanity against mono green is extremely good, right? They might get 1 or 2, which is a problem, but perhaps you can stop them from playing anymore and then get to where you can plow or whatever to get through. By the way, they have trample, so you can't even chump with Bowmasters. It's just ridiculous. But maybe you can plow your way out of it, and I've got Teferi, and I now have Recoil, which is another reasonable solution, and of course Jace if you could get to 4 mana, but it can be quite tough. But at least with this setup, I actually have a solution to that very problematic card. It also gives me a solution to Life from the Loam, which is another card that you can lose to. You can be caught in a counterspell cycle over and over and over and then just lose to. It also gives me additional game the better I know the format and what my opponents are playing, and in particular against quite a number of like combo decks and such, you can just Meddling Mage and then name the card that they need to actually resolve to go off, and you're effectively counterspelling it ahead of time. Now, that's the reason behind the Meddling Mages, but also in a deck with Standstill, having a 2-drop threat, you know, just being able to get a board presence on the board, and then maybe you force a will or you untap and plow plus Standstill, and it forces them to break it for in your favor, right? Or I guess it doesn't force, but it puts them in quite a pickle, because are they going to continue to get hit, or are they going to, are they going to cast a spell? So that's the other thing where it's really good. And of course, there are also cards like Cabal Therapy and a bunch of other stuff that all have like recursion effects that Pakula here will deal with. This is, if you don't know, I'm sure everybody watching this who's interested in Legacy already knows, but this was a card created by Chris Pakula. So if you heard me refer to it that way, it's just a habit. But way back in the day, I think he won a invitational. All right, so anyway, so that's why that's in there, and frankly, like, I miss Counterspell. I love having the card, but I still have 5 of them here, plus sort of 4, plus sort of 4 if I know what I'm doing. I'm still getting to play the control deck that I want, but I do get to also play the control deck that I need, which is probably more important. So that's the reasoning for that change. Other than that, I actually had Crucible in the main right here, but what I found is I actually moved it to the side as a Karn target. There are plenty of games where, despite having the Wastelands and the Sagas, the game ends too quickly because Saga just does so much damage that I don't really necessarily need to get into a Crucible loop. And having it as a Karn tutorable target is nice, because if the game does go long enough for that to be relevant, then I can snag it. Plus, if I have Karn out shutting off artifact mana, and then I grab Crucible to shut off non-basic mana by Wasteland Recursion, it's usually a pretty good 1-2 punch to finish a game in the event that becomes relevant. More typically, Karn is in there to kill Chalice of the Voids, because no matter how many counters are on it, Karn can just hit it and make it a 0/0 creature and kill it on the spot. Chrome Moxes shut all that junk off. Aether Vials, artifact mana, lands, of course, cards like this. There's just a lot of good uses for Karn. And as a singleton disenchant that disenchants everything and also acts as a tutor, I think I can afford the slot. I think it makes sense to be in the deck. But of course, we're going to buttress that with 4 good old-fashioned disenchants in game 2. And the reason we're running disenchant and not, say, fragmentize is that we can kill Urza's Saga with disenchant. We can kill it with frag as well, and that there's a possibility that would be better, except I'm quite concerned about this card here, and players love to Ancient Tomb Chalice on 1, and so if your answers are all 1 mana, kind of a problem, right? Of course, we do have Teferi and Recoil for that card as well, but in game 2, them getting 4 mana and making a similar play and setting it on 2 is much less likely than them getting 2 mana and setting it on 1, and that's what they love to, the Chalice players love to do. So that's why we're running the disenchants there in the sideboard over Fragmentize or something else. Let's see what else. So just talking about sideboard, I think most of these are pretty obvious. We have a Singleton Grafdigger's Cage to go along with the 4 ley lines, and that Miser's Cage is there in there because it's tutorable, because these are Enlightened Tutors for 1-drops. So we can bring in 4 Voids plus a Grafdigger's Cage, and we have already got a Nihil Spellbomb and a Bajuka Bog in the main. Single Nihil is a target, and Bog it just takes a land slot. It's a low cost defense against graveyard strategies. And so with Nihil in here, also a very low cost, 1 cost, you can draw a card off it if you want to, and we can tutor for it with Urza's Saga. So just makes a lot of sense in the main. This one, it gives me 2 graveyard hate in the main, which I can either use for mana or just get rid of if they're inconvenient. Plus Karn, which is 3, because he can now grab Grafdigger's Cage out of the sideboard. So he can grab Grafdigger's Cage, and then in game 2, Urza's Saga can grab it. And so it just makes a ton of sense. Jitei's in the board because, occasionally you get in a creature stalemate. You can just grab Jitei and go. And in game 2, a lot of times I'll just bring one in as a excellent way to, you get on this kind of cluttered board, and then a Jitei comes down and the game completely shifts 180 degrees. It's deal with Jitei or lose immediately, and we like putting our opponents in those types of situations. So very nice card to tutor for. And then I already talked Crucible. I think the rest should be pretty self-evident. Leyline, and specifically, incidentally, I guess with Leyline being, I suppose, an Inception, a card you cannot use against Slime against Humanity. A card you could use against it would be like this guy. Oh goodness, where are you? Black and colorless. Extirpate Effects is what I'm trying to get at. There's a card called Extirpate, but there's a better one. It's you can pay it with Phyrexian mana, which is what makes it better in general. And let's see, this card. So could use Surgical Extraction. That's on my radar as a possibility to replace the ley lines. You run the surgicals. That way what would end up happening is your opponent slimes, and then you surgical that thing during their draw step, so that you can take hopefully their draw step away, but also all the slimes against Humanity that they might have. Their only real response to that is to surgical their own and then not remove them from their library. That way your surgical fizzles. Of course, if you have multiple surgicals, then this is almost like the old school mental misstep fight. So that would be a reason to run surgical if my concern is specifically this deck. And we'll wait and see how, if the Meddling Mage package is enough. But if I'm not concerned about that deck, I think Leyline is still better than Extraction, because it's so very good at putting somebody in a situation where you buy time with these guys so that you can then tutor up a Grafdigger's Cage with Saga and such, and Nihil Spellbomb, and against the graveyard strategies, it's just overwhelmingly difficult for them. Plus, if you're aware of what they would use to try to deal with the Leyline, you can Meddling Mage on that card and put them in a pretty tricky spot where they have to have multiple solutions, or they have to have an outside the box solution. But a lot of times, if they're fairly cookie cutter, you can just void Meddling Mage and just completely lock them out. So what else? Shadow Spear is in here because it's absolutely a house with Urza's Saga. It's weird how good this card is with Urza's Saga. The card seems so bad to me compared to like Jitei. Like I would run Jitei in the main over this in almost any like commander deck, for example. But because you can tutor up for Saga, what it means is that a single Saga by itself with no other artifacts in play can produce a 3/3 and a 4/4 with lifelink and trample, and you can take hexproof and indestructible away from your opponent. And that's not nothing, because your opponents sometimes in the 5-color deck, I don't have it here, but they have there's a 4-mana dragon, an artifact creature who has hexproof and like 4 other abilities if they have, depending on what land types they have in play. And Shadow Spear will remove the untarget ability. It'll remove that hexproof so that you can then plow the dragon and get back to a normal game of Magic, which is really good. Of course, unless you maybe recoil or Teferi the enchantment that turns all their lands into 5 colors. Unless you do something like that, Shadow Spear is kind of your way out against that deck. So, and that's kind of the point. Everything in here has a purpose. Everything, is very specific. I think I've covered the majority. Currency Converter might be a little bit strange if you're not familiar with it, but the card's really good in here. First of all, it has a wonderful synergy with Lorien Revealed because you're discarding. So you can just discard, and then for 1 mana you can... So like you might have a Currency Converter and a single mana untap. This happens a lot. And so your opponent attacks with their Bowmasters because you can't tap it to draw and discard and also tap it to make a creature. And you just cycle Lorien Revealed, put it under the Currency Converter, grab yourself a land of your choice, and then you tap the Currency Converter because it now has a card under it, and then boop, you get to make a surprise 2/2 blocker, which is relevant more often than you think. Also, all your opponents like Duresses, Thoughtseizes and stuff, if you have a converter out they duress you, and it's like, well, okay, yeah, you got my card, but I have more pressure, right? Each time they make you discard, you just make another 2/2. So they're trading a card for they're basically playing one black, put a 2/2 into play under your opponent's control, and then take a look at their hand. Essentially, I mean, it isn't great when you don't love to have your force of will turned into a grizzly bear, right? Like, I'm not saying that that's something we want to be doing most of the time, but the fact that it usually, if they're playing a lot of the hand disruption like that, the fact that this has that impact means that they have to kind of go off when they disrupt you. They can't just like disrupt you and leave you crippled and then in a couple of turns finish you off, because they may not have a couple of turns, because you get to apply a great deal of pressure. In fact, we have all these things to apply pressure: the Force Sagas, the Mages, the Bowmasters, and the Converter, and we can put a lot of pressure on our opponents. So they don't necessarily get a ton of time, and it can be quite a problem for them. And of course, the ability to just fix your hand, to Jellum Tome is really nice. The power creep between this and Jellum Tome is just utterly, it's just mind blowing how much power creep we've had. But that's magic for you. So why the one recoil? If you're curious, besides the fact that it's just a blue forcible catch-all for everything that you can do, it also has the ability to hit lands, which I think is very important, because on occasion you have there are lands that you'd like to target that are problematic for various reasons. Also, you can, if your opponent leaves like a couple of mana up and you're expecting some kind of interaction, you can potentially recoil an untapped land and then maybe play a Standstill or a Meddling Mage or whatever it is that you want to do on your turn. Or like maybe you recoil an untapped land, they have 2 mana, and so they're thinking, do I Bowmasters in response or not? Right? Because if they do, then on your turn you just Bowmasters and kill their Bowmasters, right? So and that might be the thing you're trying to set up. So then the other thing, like I said, it's forcible, but the other thing that it does is sometimes you might recoil something like a Narset or whatever, so you bounce whatever it is, and then you just take your turn and immediately slam Standstill and say, you want to replay it, right? Maybe you do, but it's going to hurt. Or you recoil something and then on your turn you just play, if they don't discard it, you just play Meddling Mage and name the thing you just bounced, and then you took a card out of their hand and shut them down for a card. So it has really nice synergy with Meddling Mage, which is nice. And then there's some like really corner cases where you could like recoil your own, I don't know, Bojuka Bog when you're desperate to kill their graveyard. You could, as long as you have a card in hand to throw away to the recoil, you could like end step bounce your own Bog and then slam Bog and hit their graveyard another time. It's not something that you plan to do, but it's something that you keep tucked away, and you're like, this is my list of things I might do if I absolutely had to but don't want to, kind of like memory banks, right? So you do have that option there. Also, recoil being bounce is one of the only ways, by the way, that we can just get a 1 ring off the table. Of course, we can punish it with Bowmasters potentially, but having the ability to, we have Teferi to bounce it, and now we have recoil. So having 2 ways that we could get that 1 ring off the table, that would be a perfect card to like Meddling Mage afterwards, right? Means that you don't necessarily just auto lose to the card, which is really nice. So as far as Standstill goes, you might be thinking, well, it's an aggressive format. I don't like the risk of playing Standstill. I hear you, but there's a couple of reasons why it works in here. One is that we just have so much removal, right? We have 4 Bowmasters and 4 Plows. 2 is just Saga is so good because of Shadow Spear at saving you from dying against a lot of aggro. You can, and I have many times, slammed a Standstill where my opponent has the board, right? They've got like a 2/2 or a 2/3 in play, and I don't even have Saga, and I go Standstill, go. Because if all my opponent's going to do is play draw go in their aggro deck for like 10 turns while they do not attack me for 2, I am super happy with that. If this card just like time walks for like 9 turns or whatever, I am 100% good with that. And if it ancestrals, I'm 100% good with that too. Because eventually I know that if my opponent is playing that game, eventually I'm just going to find Sagas. And then Saga, all that damage is going to be completely undone when I find Shadow Spear with Saga. It doesn't work as well if you actually draw the Shadow Spear, but you still can get the Sagas and put the pressure on them. I haven't had it punish me yet. So, you know, eventually I'll get very unlucky, and it will, and then I'll say, "Damn, why isn't this shark toothing?" But but in the end, I think it's been extremely good. So that's the deck. Let's take a look at the games. First, let's take a look at the record, and then we'll get into some games. So today, the one change that you'll see today is that I didn't add the recoil until towards the very end. Recoil was, I think I was trying out the dragon, the Graveyard Exile, the Delve Dragon, and I was playing around with the slot. But I really like the recoil, actually. I love the flexibility. Anyway, so in the last 7 days, let's see if we can take a look at how the deck's been doing. We'll take a look at it with the counter magic as well. So if you go back to like the 14th, let's say the win rate has been... there's no way to filter for both, but you know, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, deck switch, and win, loss, win. Pretty high, as I said, roughly 90, between 80 and 90% win rate. Pretty good. And that's with the, you know, variations where this was actually counter spell and this was whatever. But the fundamentals have been the same for the last 2 days. I think I was playing around with some different sideboard options and stuff, but it turns out that just a simple, straightforward package seems to be what works best, given that the deck's already somewhat complex. So the sideboard needs to be somewhat simple to kind of like work with that, so that you can strip out all the, if you have like, well, I don't need Karn against them, and I don't need, you know, Narset, and maybe I could cut Nihil Spellbomb, doesn't need to be in there, and, you know, I guess I don't really see a target for recoil, or Jace is too slow, or whatever, and then you can bring in your 4 disenchants, you know, so that kind of thing. Anyway, well, let's get into some games. I'm going to go with just the games from today, since this is the most current version, and it's performing the best. You'll see, I will run through the Spatula of the Ages. I do not have, this is literally so up through here, I believe I was running Counterspell. I hit the Shadow, Spatula, switched into Pakulas, and then, you know, wins all the way down. So the first few games, you'll still see this is a continuation of the win streak from yesterday with the counter magic in the deck. The counter spells in the deck specifically. I tried that. I tried a couple other things. Ultimately, I tried like counters that exile and a bunch of other stuff. Anyway, if it comes up, I'll point it out. Is what I'm getting at. So against a Jagatha deck, I had to like Google what to expect. Is this a keep? It's not great, but it does. I do have early interaction. I can plow early, I can waste early, and I got Bog. Plus I have Saga, which is card advantage, and maybe a Karn if the game goes long. So I don't really know what to expect against Gigantha. So I Google it, and then I slam Meddling Mage naming Tribal Flames, because the only Gigantha deck that I saw had Tribal Flames. My opponent mills off an Assassin's Trophy and then plays a Breakout. So Breakout lets him look at the top 6 cards of their library. Really interesting card. Reveal a creature. If it has 2 or less, put it on the battlefield. It gives haste. If you don't, put it into your hand. So now they've got this really strong... This thing actually could make this deck, because, man, the curve of turn 1 Stalactite Stalker, turn 2 Standstill is insane. And I'm making an offhand comment, but I'm seriously considering whether or not that actually should be the way that this thing goes. This is a crazy card. 1/1 Menace. In the beginning of your end step, if you descended... summarizing this word. At the beginning of your end step, if you put a permanent into your... Or a card... Is it a card or a permanent? I believe it's a permanent. Into your graveyard from anywhere. Put a +1/+1 counter on this. And then for 3 mana, you can sacrifice it to kill a creature, as long as that creature's toughness. You can give a creature -X/-X, where X is equal to Stalactite's power. But basically, it's a unblockable card that grows every turn, and also has removal stapled onto it for 1 mana. What the crap, man? The power spike's insane. But my opponent didn't put a permanent in their graveyard, so the Descend doesn't trigger. And here I just go, so go ahead and just play Teferi. We'll bounce this, and now we're sitting on Standstill. We'll use Bakula to block Teferi to protect, hopefully. Opponent has a Bowmasters, which did not. I probably should have just plus Teferi and then passed, but, you know, here we are. And with that, I'm just going to go ahead and plow that guy and slap a Standstill into play, hit their graveyard, and pass. And Dragon Rage Channeler is not much of a threat. My opponent runs into Breakout. You can see I was running Engineer Explosives. I think I cut it after this game as a singleton. They mill off Inti, Bolt, and swing in with their 3/3 and their 1/1. Getting through some cards over there, but they have Ancestraled me. For my turn, I'm going to go ahead and just make a Construct and fetch a Nihil Spellbomb. This is a little tricky play here. And then I'm going to pass. And now their 3/3 Dragon's Rage Channeler has to attack. For their turn, they go for Grist, the Hunger Tide. And I'm going to, in response to their minus ability, I'm going to ping off their token. So if they want to sacrifice their DRC, they can. But otherwise, they just took counters off of this for nothing. And I'm going to swing in and kill it. And then worse for them, they have to attack with this. But if they do, I can actually sack Nihil Spellbomb. While this is a 3/3, they have to attack. But then I can sack Nihil Spellbomb and make it a 1/1 and just trade it with the Army token and just kill their Dragon's Rage Channeler, leaving them with just that little 1/1 in their hand, which I could force or whatever. Because next turn I'm going to go ahead and, assuming that that's how everything played out, and they put the Stalactite Stalker into play here and make it a 2/2. I'm gonna I'd consider forcing it, but I might let it go, because the plan is I'm gonna play a land, play Karn, and I'm gonna go ahead and grab that Jitte in the sideboard, and then I'm just gonna kill all their little dorks in that manner. To be honest, because I didn't really want to have to sack the Spellbomb, and I have other artifacts in the plan. I think on this turn I would have actually allowed them to hit me for 3 here, and then played my land, crack back, kill the Grist, and then dealt with the rest. But anyway, my opponent is feeling pretty far behind, so they just scoop. We move into game 2. And see how nice it is to be able to tutor with your lands. I just love it. It's so important for this deck. So I sideboard in Red Blasts, thinking that that's what I need here. Opponent leads off with an early Stalker, and still has their Giganta. Mills off another permanent, so that means that they're going to get to trigger. This triggers from anywhere, so even if you mill, cycle, whatever, just crazy. Yeah, this game's not... drawing the Shadow Spear isn't great. Drawing no Saga isn't great. Opponent's getting in there. Goes for a Tarmogoyf. I gotta force that. It's way too big. But that means that their guy gets bigger. Where are my plows? Where are my sagas? Where's my anything? Do I have anything? I have nothing. I don't know why I kept this hand, frankly. It just wasn't good. I saw Force of Will and was like, oh, I guess I can just keep. So I'm getting beat down. They play a Tarmogoyf. Do I have a plow? No, I don't even have a play. So I believe I conceded, and we just moved in. I didn't need to show them any more of my deck. Like, I just can't deal with that at all. So whatever. All right, game 3. Now I get to go first. And very nice hand. Much better. Much better. I've got interaction. I'm going to lead with that. Even if they wasteland me here, I just go get another one. So, but this way I have the ability to remove a turn 1 threat. All right. So I'm going to brainstorm. Figure out my hand. I go ahead and decide I want to keep... I could have cycled during my upkeep, but I decided I'm going to keep 1 card on top. The Bowmasters. I decided I want the Bowmasters against this particular opponent. They go for a Grim Flare, and we'll just get rid of that and go ahead and grab ourselves a Swamp for that Bowmasters, drawing a Wasteland. Really nice. And I'll pass here. hoping I can just make a robot. My opponent plays a DRC, and in response to their bobble, before they can get a big enough graveyard, I'm just gonna Bowmaster that thing immediately. Then the bobble can come down. Sure, they mill off a Tarmogoyf with their trigger, and I'm fine with that. All right, well, I didn't get to make a robot earlier, but I go ahead and make one now. And we'll grab Nihil Spellbomb. Of course, they're playing a graveyard deck from what I can tell, so I'm going to have that as a defense against whatever other shenanigans they're up to over there. I could have got a Spear, but I'm feeling pretty safe here. They get their Breakout, and Breakout produces a hasty Tarmogoyf. I'm not going to chump. I'll just take the 5. That's fine. And then for my turn, I draw a Brainstorm, so I'll go ahead and Brainstorm it up. Play a Wasteland, attack their mana again, and swing in for 4. I've got too many permanent types in my graveyard not to plow this Tarm, so we're going to do that. I actually misplayed because I should have done it on my turn. Anyway, of all the things that they've played, the thing that is the biggest problem at this point would be a Tarmogoyf, another one. So I play Meddling Mage naming Tarmogoyf. They get a Bowmasters out and ping, and then they use a Bobble. And I screw up here. I forget that the Bobble triggers during my upkeep, because I could actually flash Bowmasters out, kill their Bowmasters, and then shoot their Orc. And I miss the trigger. I was really unhappy with myself there. But I am pressuring them. As I said, even a Grizzly Bear sometimes is all you need to put some pressure on the opponent. Let's get another Meddling Mage and name Grist, so that whatever their next play is isn't going to be, killing my killing whatever they choose to on my board. They do duress away my other Bowmasters, unfortunately, but like a boss, I just rip one off the top and let's go. We're going to get in there. Opponent just takes a trade. I'm fine with it. This time I'm not going to name Meddling Mage. There's nothing I've seen that I'm particularly afraid of, and they're at 2. They Pyroblast and play a Tarmogoyf and a Stalactite Stalker, but at that point I get to Bowmaster away their Stalker before it grows and create a 1/1, and I can attack with 2 creatures and finish them off. I probably should have played Meddling Mage naming Pyroblast, now that I think about it, but I wasn't even 100% that they were running. I mean, it's hard because do you name Pyro or do you name Red Elemental Blast? Do you name something else? It's hard to do something like that for a card like that, and it all worked out. So we move on to round 2. That opponent was the second best performer. They got a game win. Nobody else has won a game except the guy who just 2-0'd me. And this was not pre-Meddling Mage, I suppose, but you'll see how it went. I think, I can't remember. Yeah, this is all Meddling Mage, but I think I don't know. Maybe I just mulliganed poorly or whatever, but we'll see how it went. We'll get there. All right, leading off here, I've got Interaction. I've got Wasteland and Plow. I can improve my hand here, and I've got Meddling Mage to potentially stop nonsense, depending on what I see from my opponent. Oh, Standstill? Don't mind if I do. Right off the top against an empty board? Heck yeah. Opponent plays Lotus Petal. I get to Ancestral. Ooh, God. 4th Eolingus. Imprinted on a Chrome Mox. Seasoned Dungeoneer. They have the initiative, and they grab a Plains. This is a little bit not what I was hoping to see there. All right, well, I'm going to just Meddling Mage naming another. I do not want another Seasoned Dungeoneer coming down. I can't counter with Cavern of Souls. So I'm going to let my opponent forge, and then in response to the forge trigger, we'll go ahead and plow that thing. So they waste their initiative trigger there. And then for their turn, they just play an Anemic Simian Spirit Guide. I am good with that. And fortunately, I have Jace, so boop. I now have the initiative. Let's go grab ourselves a Plains, I believe, or a Swamp Island. Yeah, there we go. Opponent just plays another Simian Spirit Guide. My guy's now 4/4, thanks to the initiative. Initiative is just such a busted mechanic, especially when I have it in my control deck. I brainstorm into a pretty horrible hand there. I'm just going to slam Standstill and chill. I could have played a Bowmasters too, but I prefer to have, if my opponent cracks the Standstill, I know my top 2 cards suck, So if my opponent cracks a Standstill, I'm going to cycle Lorien Revealed and Response more than likely. I was, afraid of another fourth year Lingus here, so I was playing to beat that. Because if they do like crack it to cast fourth and they get 3 guys and they send with the 3 cats, the 3 creatures, I'll just let the Standstill break, take my cards I don't want, slap a Bowmasters into play, and then block. More than likely, if they send them all at my face, then I might not block in the same way because I wouldn't be able to block all of it. But, I could still Bowmasters, pings off one of these, the 1/1, then finishes it off, Meddling Mage, the 4/4 Meddling Mage blocks, and then the 2 cats, I let them through, right? And my opponent takes the Monarch, which then will allow me to shoot them and make it grow. And then on my turn, I shoot them and get my 1/1 back. And then on my turn, I just send in with the singular Bowmasters, who I'm not going to be chumping with, take the Monarch back, Jace away one of the cats or whatever. I mean, it's pretty much over at that point. So my opponent had an insane start, right? Like that's the kind of start that normally beats the control deck. But it turns out that when you can Ancestral in your control deck, you often find ways to win games. So this is a new thing that nobody's ever figured out before, right? Anyway, so game 2, I decide to mulligan. I want to take a look at that again. Why did I mulligan in game 2? Let's take a look. Sorry, I was going a little quick. All right. Okay. So this was a little, it makes sense, but I'm going second, and I know they've got City of Traders, Chrome, Mox, and all that stuff. So I want to keep this, but the problem is there's no Force of Will, there's no Plow, there's no interaction, it's all on Standstill, and Standstill going second against a deck with Moxes and stuff, probably not. So I mulligan away, and I find this looks a little bit better. At least I can kill something red, I can interact with their first play, and maybe I can Lorien into mana for Standstill. So opponent goes City of Traders, pitch Spirit Guide, cast Fable. I gotta force that thing. I force away with Pakula. Sorry, man, I appreciate you, but not gonna work out right now. And then, now I have Blast. So all I want right now is just play a red card, play a red card, play a red card. Come on, red card. And they name Archon. Yuck. Not what I wanted to see. An uncounterable Archon. Non-basic lands enter the battlefield tap. Thankfully, I do have a basic, or 2, or 3. So I grab a Tundra there. Oh, I don't know why I did that, but I'm rewarded. Basically, I get to blast a 4th here and take 2. I guess I grabbed Tundra because I figured I needed to plow. And then I'm going to slam, and this is what I was talking about, I'm going to slam Standstill and just start getting hit for 2 every turn. My opponent realizes that's not actually a route to victory for them, so I go ahead and waste them and plow off of the Ancestral Recall cards and play an Urza's Saga. Opponent hits me for 2, sure. I'm just going to fix my hand here. Saga, incidentally, is another shuffle for Brainstorm, which is another function that it plays in this. Yep, I'll take the 2 again and play a Construct, and then from here we're going to go ahead and make another Construct, and we're going to do exactly what I mentioned before. I'm going to go grab that Shadow Spear, put a Mystic Sanctuary into play tapped. Since it comes in and play tapped, it doesn't trigger, which I knew. I just wanted to get in play. All my lands are coming in and play tapped, right? I take 2. So there's my 2/3/3s, but one of them, like I said, will be a 4/3. They get another Archon out. I mean, they're trying to beat me with 2/3 flyers, right? Like a draft card. I mean, it's a brutal card to face most of the time, but Saga just does so much to fix problems like that. And here we are. So I'm going to name Meddling. I'm going to play Meddling Mage, naming Seasoned Dungeoneer, because the one thing I fear right now is that specific card. That's the card I don't want to see. I don't believe my opponent's playing Plows, and why would they leave him in against me? And also, I don't want to name it and shut my own off. But Seasoned Dungeoneer, now that would be a problem. So I play that, I name it, my opponent just concedes, even though it taps me out for the moment. But, they can't race here. I mean, they hit me for 4. I hit them for 4 in game 4. It doesn't work at all. So they have to hold back, but they can't block. They could double block is the best that they can do, right? So, and without seasoned dungeoneers, pro creatures, and hitting for 5 and all that crazy crap that it does, I'm in pretty good shape. So we move on. That was game 2. And I got this game against Paco Loco. All right, let's see how this plays out. Oh yeah, I was testing out, instead of recoil, I was testing out the big delve creature, like I said. My first hand didn't have a sufficient, I don't know why it's turboing through so quickly. It would be nice if it would just slow down a bit. Play, pause. Play, pause. All right. Yeah, I guess I just didn't, I just wasn't comfortable with it. I don't know, I can't see my opening hand. It's whipping through too fast, but I wasn't super comfortable with it, so I just take them all again. It's probably because I didn't have any interaction. Like, if you have nothing, you have no stifle, no plow, no force, no wastelands, you probably have no hand. You don't have a keep. So here I have a turn 1 plowshares, which is really nice. I'm just going to play Saga on turn 2. Hope that it doesn't get wasted. We'll see what happens. My opponent has turn 2 Eidolon of the Great Revel, which deals 2 damage anytime someone plays a card that costs 3 or less, and I draw Shadow Spear. Like, the one card I literally would like to draw any card but Shadow Spear. I do not want to draw that card, right? Because I want to tutor it. But I draw it, and of course I don't want to be casting it. All right, they swing in, I take it. Hoping for no Blood Moon here, but I do have at least an island and a plains. They play Rolling Vortex and a Lava Spike, which is going to deal 1 to me, and if I play a card that costs 0, I'll take 5, and it can prevent me from gaining life. Of course, there's a timing issue with that. I draw my other 1-drop. What the crap, man? So I get my only 1 here. Like, this is the worst possible outcome. I'm going to go ahead and actually just play Currency Converter and smash them for 4 here, just because I want a bigger blocker. And I want to hide the Shadow Spear from the Rolling Vortex. I would like them to tap out and not kill me. So they bolt away my guy and then play another Vortex. That's what I want to see. Now I can take 2 damage here. And yeah, so what ends up happening is I play Wasteland, Shadow Spear, equip Shadow Spear, opponent concedes. I jump up 4 life and then they concede there from there. So yeah, pretty good, pretty good. Or maybe... Oh no, I don't even think that's what happened. I think they assumed I still had Shadow Spear in my deck, and they just conceded to the Saga. I mean, it's very hard for them with only 2 cards to deal with this. They can't Price of Progress me out, which is another thing that's nice about the Sagas is that they go away against Price of Progress. They obviously get hosed by Blood Moon pretty hard, but that's why we have Red Blast or Blue Blast in the sideboard. But my opponent, in their mono red, they should be beating control, but I guess they just didn't want to keep going against me. So Rounded Pegasus 9 is the next opponent. Also only played 1 game. Let's see if we can get it to stop. Okay, that's clearly a mulligan. And next hand is a keep. I mean, we've got some interaction. We've got card fixing. We're going to put that basic land back. Let's see if I need it. Hopefully I don't. Oh, basic island makes me a little nervous because if that's mono blue, I don't like it. Well, Misty is maybe a little bit better. They brainstorm. Smart. They're playing around Bowmasters. That's what you have to do. I'm going to also brainstorm here and do the same. Okay. Let's play a Saga into Standstill. Do they have Force of Will? They do. So I get a brainstorm. So that's pretty strong. Then they... Oh, Merchant Scroll for Intuition and play a Candelabra of Thanos. So now I know exactly what I'm facing, and I know that they're playing High Tide, and I was hoping to drop a cooler right there. So my opponent's turn, they don't do anything, so at the end of their turn, I'm going to play the Bowmasters. I'd like that in play against them, obviously. Still no force, still no much of anything. I'm going to make a construct token, and just in case it's going to mess with them, I'll go ahead and play Nihil Spellbomb. In case, their plan is to somehow recycle cards to their graveyard. They're going to Intuition, and don't get what I expect. They triple Mind's Desire, so of course I give them Mind's Desire. And here comes the High Tide, and I've got no... Now this makes 2 mana, but I can't do anything with it. They Merchant Scroll, and they get another High Tide. They High Tide that off. And then they play a big old Mind's Desire for 4. And they reveal High Tide. Merchant Scroll, which they can play all these for 0. Candelabra and Flusterstorm. They don't get a win condition. And from there, they just scoop. They went off, or tried to go off, and then lost. And then they totally concede against me. Of course, against them, I'm already sort of pre-sideboarded because I have Stifle for the Storm effect, and I've got Meddling Mages to name High Tide, and I've got Standstills and then the Forces, of course, and I can disrupt them with Narsets and Teferis. In game 2, I really have like no sideboard against them, except Disenchants to deal with back to basics in exchange for my Swords to Plowshares. Oops. All right, so next would be, but my opponent doesn't want anything to do with it and plays Well-Wisher 26. I remember how I lost the Spatula of the Ages. Yeah. Never mind. It just came back. It wasn't what I thought it was. All right. It was actually a bit of a problem for me, but Well-Wisher 26. Yeah, I mean, Force of Will into Standstill is a beautiful hand. We're going to keep that, especially when you've got free search and everything else. My opponent, unfortunately, exiles an Atraxa to grief me, and, you know, I'm not going to... I'll let him 1-for-1 me and not 2-for-1 me, and look at that rip off the top. So they take Force of Will. I could have forced that, but then if they reanimate grief, I've then lost 3 cards and probably lost the game at that point. Just let them have it. Appeal Swords of Plowshares off the top. Then they entomb an Archon of Cruelty, which is a bad thing to have to plow, but much better than the Atraxa that they Force of Willed with. All right, so, or griefed with. And such a huge rip for me, just right on time. But hopefully they don't have oh, well, they do. Okay, I'm going to fetch in response in case they have some kind of Stifle effect. It's going to come out, and I'm going to put the card draw on the stack, and then I'm going to plow this in response before they find... and I'm just going to discard Meddling Mage, and my opponent gets to draw a card. But I get to get all that card advantage back, that lost card advantage back by standstilling. Unfortunately, they do have a Force of Will, but I still 2-for-1 them, and we're back to roughly even. I draw Bowmasters. I'm going to cycle. I want to hit my land drops, and I go ahead and just play Underground Sea here and pass. I should have played Tundra to hide what I was doing, or tap the Underground Sea if I want to play the Underground Sea. Opponent draws and misses a land drop. Yeah, I'm going to start pressuring, I think. Oh, I was getting greedy with the Bowmasters. I should have pressured right there in case I drew a land into Jace, which is exactly what happened. Because my opponent then might have dazed and, you know, oops. Hindsight's 20/20, but still, I should have attempted to make the play. They then grief me with the Bowmasters taking Stifle. And they are down to 2 cards in hand. And I rip a Currency Converter off the top. So we'll see if this can do anything at all against this very scary deck. Now, if my opponent does reanimate grief, I'm going to play Bowmasters in response and be mostly okay. They play a Wasteland, though, so I'm a little nervous about using Converter. Plus, I don't necessarily want to throw away a Bowmasters. So I'm just going to wait here. I'm going to go ahead and Saga. And the reason I'm nervous about it is if they have a Bowmasters of their own, I need to always be the guy playing mine second. All right, so they go for a Wasteland, which is kind of what I thought. Basically, now I can convert. Now, I could have kept that Lorien in order to cycle it and create a free creature, but Bowmasters is so strong against another Bowmasters deck that I'd rather just go ahead and imprint the Lorien now. And now I've got a 2/2. So on this turn during my main step, I'm going to Currency Converter to see if I can find anything better. I've got a 2/2 waiting for me, right? I don't find anything better, and Karn is pretty good, and I could have gotten it and used it to get the Grafdigger's Cage, but I completely blanked on what I could... I completely forgot about Grafdigger's Cage in my sideboard, so I throw it away, keep the Force of Will, and now I can make that lovely play of just cycling Lorien Revealed and getting an island if I want to. I'm going to stop tapping Currency Converter here. Okay, my opponent cycles and goes and gets Undercity Sewers, and then creates a Polluted Delta. They now have a big threat in their graveyard, so time's running out. All right, we're going to just get some pressure going because, like I said, time is running out. And rip, Standstill, baby. Goes for it, and now you can see why I held the blue card. This is why I didn't cycle, by the way. I'm going to force to protect my... They force with a force. I'm going to force back and protect my Ancestral Recall. And I'm not going to flash, again, not flashing Bowmasters out in response. I'll just keep making guys with Currency Converter. This is fine. We can just play Standstill all day long. Bowmasters is in there to kill other Bowmasters, basically. All right, let's swing in. And now I have Saga as well. All right, so they finally, Desperation. They got a Bowmasters and break it. They ping. Go for a block. I'm just going to Bowmasters and kill their guy, make sure that that happens. And yeah, I'm fine. We can trade. I don't need to flash out my other Bowmasters. I'm going to Brainstorm, and with that, I find a Meddling Mage, and I'm going to slam it, naming Reanimate. So they might have Animate dead, but that's a lot less scary than Reanimate is. They, look at that, they grief me using Reanimate, taking my Lorien Revealed, my Brain Geyser, and giving me a 2/2 instantly. Thank you. He says, guess what I just top decked? All right, Saga ticks up, and you can see how much, this is a control deck, but look at the insane amounts of pressure we can put on our opponents, right? What are we swinging for, like a ton? How about, I believe, lethal? Yeah, so Bowmasters comes down, they go to 14, this becomes a 2/2, and then we hit them for 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, plus the ping is 10. Yeah, so they would go to 5. So not quite lethal, but they go to 5, and then I get to activate Saga. And I mean, what are they going to do? Reanimate? I mean, I've already plowed their Archon. Their Atrax is gone. They could reanimate Grief or a Troll, but that doesn't deal with this board at all. And of course, Saga is going to pump out a guy. And then if they don't do anything significant, if they somehow went like Dark Ritual, maybe they go Dark Ritual... Toxic Deluge or something, right? So I would, not that they're playing these cards, but so I would end step make a Saga token, and then I get to go and make another Saga token, and then tutor up Nihil Spellbomb and take them off of Reanimation. So they're 100% like toast there. So we move on to game 2, and now of course I get to bring in the 4 ley lines plus the Grafdigger's Cage. And there's a ley line in my opener, so yeah, that's a keep. Opponent has Ponder there. Off a basic land, which is an unfortunate thing, and then griefs me. Takes out a Bowmasters. And they've exiled Troll and Ponder. So my hand is not too great, but I have some mild interaction. I can stifle the next grief if I want to. Or, better yet, a polluted delta. So considering that I have, or better yet, a wasteland. So considering, what my hand looks like, I'm doing okay. I'm concerned that they might try to bounce the ley line, so I would stifle the delta, yeah, if they make the play, because most bounce spells that they're going to be running, the ones that I'm aware of, are going to cost 2 mana. They leave a card on top, play Undercity Sewers, and pass. Even though it'd be nice to make a robot here, I'll get around to it. More importantly, I really want to wasteland them. So I'm giving up a creature here. In fact, I'm giving up 2 of them in order to stall them. But I have another Saga in my hand, so, Alright, so they fetch out an Underground. They knew about, I think, one of the wastelands, but not both. I'll go ahead and float some mana. And with that, we're going to go ahead and fetch up Currency Converter. I'm still feeling pretty good about my situation. I'm going to go ahead and wasteland them again. They play a Dress Down, and in response, I'm going to cycle away a Snow-Covered Island, which I can turn into a treasure. Alright, so Dress Down goes away. They play yet another land and grief me, but now I just get another Grizzly Bear. Discard against Currency Converter. This is why I grabbed Currency Converter over like Grafdigger's Cage, because I'm still feeling like I'm in a pretty good spot with the ley line going. I play Meddling Mage, and of course they force it there. If they had Daze, I was going to just make a treasure and counter the Daze essentially that way. So I was playing around Daze there. Alright, we'll go ahead and just make a Grizzly Bear instead. And then once again, the relentless pressure of this deck continues. We'll go ahead and name Brazen Borrower. That's the card that I'm pretty sure most of those decks run as their answer to a card like Leyline. Opponent cycles Troll and gets a land drop. So they now have got 3 cards. One of them's a land and 1 unknown. Alright. We'll go ahead and make a treasure, which will make future Saga tokens bigger. Provided I have no need to, I don't intend to sack it. I'll swing in with just the Rogue, because I don't want to walk the Meddling Mage into a Bowmaster flashed out that would then ping it and kill it. Opponent reanimates my own Bowmasters. Very clever. I forgot about that. Kind of sucks. Alright, well, with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and create a robot here, and we'll make another one. Also, currency converter, because I'm playing ley lines and they usually suck super bad when you draw them, but with currency converter tutorable for me, I can fix that anytime. And now I get Grafdigger's Cage, and from here, they've got to deal with both a ley line and a cage, and they can no longer continue to animate things from my graveyard. And this game's definitely it, right? Like 2 5/5s and a couple of other things, locking down most of anything that they could possibly do. Super, super over from here. But yeah, you can see the nice synergy between Saga, Currency Converter, and Leyline out at the sideboard. It's really quite sweet, as well as, of course, our sideboarded cage and everything. Just very, very clean game against Reanimator, Scaminator. And here you can see me lose to Spatula of the Ages. You'll see why. There really wasn't a lot I could do, honestly, as I recall. This is a perfect hand, right? I could double force Standstill. So my opponent reveals Yorion, but they are going first. They have Abundant Growth here. I needed to force a negation that. It is going to punish me hard. Turning there. Also, I'm running that stupid Murktide still, which, if it was recoil here, would just have been absolute, like. But I mean, it's kind of like, why would I force an Abundant Growth? But I probably should have. My opponent has, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life and draw a card. I don't want that in play. I'm going to go ahead and brainstorm and set myself up. We're going to get a Standstill down. Like, I should be winning this game. I've got Force of Negation going. Opponent's going to break it with, back to basics. I got to force that. And, okay. We'll go an Island Cycle into a basic land here. Slap another Standstill down. Unfortunately, I burned through a lot of forces. And my opponent has another back to basics. And I don't find a solution. So I'm going to go dig for my other basics. And this was the exact, and this happened to be the exact match that I decided, if you take a look at the deck, by the way, sorry, I'm dead, by the way. My opponent's going to start drawing cards and I can't play. But the deck list has double basic island plains. That was the exact game where I said I refuse to continue without having multiple basic lands. In this exact game, in this exact scenario, very frustrating that I had, because I had another non-basic that I didn't need. I had like a 3rd fetch land or something. I just don't need it. I have 6 ways to fetch lands. I'm fine. I had an extra Flooded Strand instead of an extra basic island, and I got punished mega hard for it. So we sideboard, and of course I bring in Disenchants. And I have a very questionable keep, but I can deal with card drawing creatures and maybe punish card drawing a little bit. And I have some basic lands and basic land fetching. So I decide, okay, there's a Wild Growth. And then I think, okay, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I played no creatures in game 1, right? So presumably they can't, and they're in a green-blue deck. So how are they going to deal with Meddling Mage naming Argothian Enchantress? And then I'll plow the other guy that draws them cards. And then I should be able to buy some time and so that I can find a Standstill and get back in the game myself, right? But my opponent has Abundant Growth into on Thin Ice. They left creature removal in the graveyard, exiling Pakula. Well, that sucks. Well, hopefully they just did it for future enchantresses. I'm going to go ahead and currency convert Bowmasters away. This is a mistake. My opponent is going to slam Enchantress, and I have no Bowmasters to punish it. And they're going to start drawing extra cards, and I have nothing. I have nothing in my deck that I can do. I can't deal with this card at all. So other than punishing them with Bowmasters, and I just got rid of my Bowmasters. Very poor play, poor choices. All right, well, I'll Island Cycle. Yeah, I can make Grizzly Bears while my opponent's drawing cards. And look, no other island to go get. Ugh. I mean, maybe there's some vague. I mean, are they going to run out of gas? I thought about it, and then I realized there's nothing. There's no chance. Like I'd have to find Narset, maybe. Like that'd be the only thing I could really do here. But on this turn, my opponent's going to draw multiple cards and kind of go off. And of course, they're going to be playing enchantments to deal with permanents. Like it was just hopeless. That removal to get to our Argothian Enchantress was just so bad for me. I just, ugh. All right, so we move into the next game against Modin Novata. That was clearly a situation where Counterspell would have been better than Meddling Mage, but I mean, if it's the Argothian Enchantress deck, I think I'll probably take my risks. All right, this has got some interaction. It's got mana. It does good stuff. Oh, don't know why my opponent conceded against me, to be quite honest. We'll play against Furin instead. You don't really love seeing your artifacts, but you don't hate it either. Like, you want to tutor them all into play, but you don't hate it because they're all good and they all do good things. All right, so I decide I'm going to keep... it doesn't look like it, but this deck has all the mana it needs and it has some interaction. So we'll lead off with Saga. I probably should have led with Wasteland. My opponent plays a Hedge Maze. But I wanted to get like set up to tutor quickly because I'd like to Lorien here to get some mana from my Bowmasters, right? But I'd like to also be set up, get the Saga sacrifice so I can tutor as quickly as possible. My opponent ponders and I go ahead and ping him. And ping them again. So at this point, I don't know what they're playing. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and float some mana here. And then we'll go ahead and grab a currency converter. And then convert the Lorien into plains and a Grizzly Bear. And from there, I'm going to play Meddling Mage. And I name Up the Beanstalk. I'm just not sure what they're playing. I wasn't familiar with the deck that starts off like this, but it seemed like they were playing like kind of a slow, and then when I see the pedal, I'm going, oh no, I think I named the wrong card. They do the rest a Grizzly Bear out of me, and then play a Talisman, and then a bit of a Desperation Brainstorm there. I'm just going to ping the crap out of them, right? And make a Grizzly Bear. They take my Teferi. I'll go ahead and put it back into the graveyard. And draw for the turn. And I rip Standstill. My opponent decides that they are dead. And as it turns out, they are. 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 8, 8, 9, 9, 10. Dead. Just like that. Like, what was that? Turn 3 kill. Very, very fast. But my opponent did a little bit of damage to themselves, and the rest was, you know, the deck can be quite aggressive for a control deck. All right, so game 2, I have a better idea that they're playing combo. I've got this hand here. It's a little sketch, but it's got Disenchant, it's got Stifle. I can bog if, you know, to handle their graveyard. I've got threats. I think I'm going to keep it. It's nice to not necessarily have, and then my opponent leads off with Carpet of Flowers, so we'll just go ahead and play around that. Force off the top is very welcome sight. All right, so Carpet's doing nothing here. And I could continue to play around Carpet of Flowers, but I don't need to because of the Disenchant. So I will just go ahead and, well, I'll play Wasteland first, right? Let's waste them there. Yep, I did it during upkeep because if they were going to tap out on my turn, I would waste them afterwards. But if they had a Stifle, I wanted to fight on their turn. And so Carpet just doing nothing there. I try Currency Converter, which I'm not pleased with since that's what I wanted to tutor into play. But I'll go ahead and grab the Nihil. I took out the, and then I am going to play a land and disenchant their mana source there. I took out the Shadow Spear and I took out the 4 Swords to Plowshares. Because I figured that I still have some creature removal in the deck with the configuration. Such, and I really wanted, excuse me for the yawns, and I really wanted to, well, I didn't feel like the anti-creature, anti-aggro stuff was particularly important. My opponent duresses a Stifle away and gives me a Grizzly Bear. I'm still on Force of Will, which is interesting, so I'll just make the creature. Alright, Saga triggers. I'm going to play another land. I don't see a reason to exile their graveyard yet. Because I drew a blue card there, I feel comfortable going ahead and play the Teferi. I don't see a reason to bog them just yet. I plus up Teferi. I'm not in a rush. I don't know what they're going to play here, and I'd like to bounce it if it's something that I need to bounce. All right. With Saga on the stacked, I'm not even going to bother with robots here. I just float the mana and bounce my own currency converter to get a card, replay it, and then cast Meddling Mage naming Lotus Petal, and now I'm going to play my Bog and exile their graveyard and attack. So it'll be harder for them to go off, is what I'm thinking here. And with Teferi out, they can't use the green card that prevents... They can use the green card that prevents their cards from being countered, but they have to play it in advance. They can't play it in response, which is really nice. All right, drawing a Stifle. I'm going to just plus and swing. Now the pressure's on, and I can continue to improve my hand if no other actions take place, as well as grow that currency converter. So they get an LED. I thought about LED, but I was less concerned about that than Lotus Petal, because Lotus Petal LED comes with a pretty high cost, right? Lotus Petal does not. All right, let's put the card I don't want on top, and we're going to currency convert away the island into a treasure next turn available. And there's a Wasteland. They can't respond because of Teferi. We'll go ahead and plus up Teferi and swing. And now I have 4 mana in play, even though it doesn't look like it, if I want it. And of course, we're going to do the same thing. Brainstorm, currency convert. Another really strong interaction if you have the mana to do it, because you can decide what you're going to be discarding. All right, let's brainstorm. I actually like all of my cards, so I'm going to increase the clock. We're going to go ahead and play this Bowmaster here, ping them, and make a treasure, which I could use to activate Nihil Spellbomb had I wanted to. We'll go ahead and minus Teferi and Bowmaster my opponent, ping them. They're down to 6. We swing in for 6 and they die. Or actually, we swing for 2, 4, 6, 7, and they die. It's like 1 second, you're taking a small beat down, and the next second you're just dead against this deck. So that was very cool. And game 1, game 2, and we move on against Achilles 6. And my opening hand is keepable. We've got mana, we've got forces, we've got interaction, and we've got something long term. So yeah, I like it. Opponent Faithless Lootings, and I just decide right off the bat, because that thing has flashback and I really don't want them doing that. I assume they're on Dredge. So I'm going to go ahead and pitch my Force, because Force is horrible against Dredge. And I'm going to force a negation to get that thing out of the graveyard completely, and hope that this is going to be enough between the plows. The Meddling Mage I just drew, it's not looking good, right? But maybe. All right, opponent mills off a Dread Return, plays Cabal Therapy, names Brainstorm. I agree, that's a very good choice. I'm going to go ahead and end a turn. I'm not going to try to get value out of the currency converter with that cycle. I need to hit my land drops and rip off the top Nihil Spellbomb, but I'm not ready to play it yet. There isn't enough of a threat in play yet. There's a Dread Return, there's a Careful Study, a Cabal Therapy. I go ahead and Meddling Mage, naming Cabal Therapy. My opponent breaks through, and for 1, hits a Lotus Petal and sets up their graveyard for tons of good stuff. But right off the top, Nihil Spellbomb, boop, nope, and now they have no hand at all. I'll go ahead and play the converter. We'll get a second Tundra, play the converter and pass. And now we just need to pressure them quickly enough, but with no cards, a Gemstone Mine almost dead, a Petal, they're playing against this. They can't therapy me to, and the next thing I'm going to do is play another Meddling Mage, and I'm going to name, probably Breakthrough or something along those lines. Or I might name whatever, but the bottom line was, look at that, double therapy. Yeah, it was just good stuff. So we move on to game 2. So game 1, my main deck, tutorable graveyard control wins. Even though my hand looked kind of garbage, but in game 2 we get to bring in the Ley Lines as well as the Grafdigger's Cage. We sideboard out the Karn and the 4 plows, I believe. Yeah, leaving in the Bowmasters so that I can get rid of Bridge from Below by pinging my own Bowmaster. Well, I also brought in the Red Blasts, the Elemental Blasts. I think I took out the Meddling Mages at that point. Opponent Cabal Therapies me, names Nihil Spellbomb because it's what beat him, and sees this hand, exiles their Cabal Therapy and scoops. They've got 4 cards left. I think probably because of the Wasteland, but yeah, that's it. Dredge, how to beat Dredge. All right, Sparhawk 221 is my final opponent for the evening. And Sparhawk 221 is, hopefully it's a good game. And I draw the most absurd, Magic Online, what are you doing to me? This kind of stuff was happening to me over the last couple of days. I just don't know why, but yeah, you know, it's clearly a mulligan. I don't love it, but interaction, mana, card drawing, it's a keep. And I think I decided to throw away Karn here, or maybe just the island. The Karn. It's certainly safer. Because I want a Wasteland and have enough mana to play a Narset. Opponent leads off with Underground Sea. I'm going to go ahead and hold my Elorian in case I draw a Force of Will. And I draw a Standstill. So let's go for it. They Thought Scour themselves. All right, this is beautiful. This game was such an enjoyable game. So they Thought Scour themselves, milling off Cabal Therapy and some other stuff. I think they dredge. Oh, they mill off Thought Scour, Scalding Tarn, and Stinkweed Imp. And on their turn, they dredge through Therapy, Grave Crawler, which at least is cast from the graveyard, Polluted Delta Consider, and then they play a Dakmor Sage. We're going to have to keep track of this. Of course, they're not breaking my Standstill. Opponent knows what they're doing. I'm going to attack their blue. I mean, what else am I going to do? I've got double things to do under the Standstill. Opponent draws and does nothing, which gets the Stinkweed Imp back in the graveyard by discard. I'm going to cycle. Instead, they discard Prized Amalgam, so they now have a 3/3. Alright, I'm just going to play the land. Next turn, they discard another Prized Amalgam. I'm just playing Draw Go over here. Next turn, they discard Bloodghast. Okay. And then on their turn, they play a tapped Dakmor Salvage, which triggers Bloodghast, which is going to trigger both Prized Amalgams. So, looks like I have to break the Standstill, right? No. Wrong. I'm going to cycle Lorien Revealed. I can win by breaking the Standstill. I can only win by doing exactly what I just did, being patient and drawing Saga. Now I have a chance to win. Alright, it's pretty much it. I was, of course, hungering for Saga quite badly the whole time. Opponent smashes me for 8 and discards a Stinkweed Imp. I play a land and tick up Saga. Opponent smashes me for 8 again. And I make a construct. They discard Stinkweed Imp. Oh no, they dredge Stinkweed Imp into another one. During my upkeep, I make a construct token, play another Saga for my turn, equip the Shadow Spear I tutored for, and I have a 4/4 lifelink and a 3/3, and I'm sitting under a Standstill with some counter magic and a plow. My opponent then dredges again, hits Narcomoeba. They now got Gravecaller, Bloodghast, a bunch of other stuff. They play a Watery Grave. They get a Bloodghast into play, and look at their board, right? They're just beating me down. Sort of. I block, gain 4, lose 5, so I go down 1 life. Saga ticks up. I take away their blue mana, make yet another robot, and smash in and gain 5. Back to 8. Play a land, fetch, and equip Shadow Spear. I just move it over, leaving up Swords to Plowshares. They mill off a Bloodghast, play a land, triggering a Prized Amalgam, the one that already, well, Bloodghast and Prized Amalgam, actually, they play a land, they don't mill. They just recur the 2 creatures that died last turn. I draw the 1 Vindicate, which is now a Recoil, make a Construct token, tutor for a Nihil Spellbomb, mash for, what is this, 6, 12, 19 points of damage, and 7 points of lifelink, plus I have a 6/6 blocker. My opponent did this with their dredge deck, and I played a turn 5 Urza's Saga and won. Never broke my own Standstill. Absolutely awesome. Didn't even need the Nihil Spellbomb, although I would have loved to have. Obviously, what I would have done here is let them do all their blocks, hopefully killing off. I would have loved to have hidden this, but I have to do it during my main because that's when it breaks. But, you know, hopefully killing off like Bloodghast and... Well, Bloodghast can't even block, actually. Yeah, so they can only block with 2 creatures. So they would have to block... Like, they have to block here because otherwise they're dead. They have to block at least one thing. So more than likely, they would want to block with Prized Amalgam, but then that just puts it in the graveyard for Spellbomb. Probably they chump with Narcomoeba. They didn't have a bridge from below. So even if they chump with Narcomoeba here and go to 3, and I gain 7 and go to 14, on their turn, if they dredge into anything relevant, I'm just going to Spellbomb. Otherwise, I'm not necessarily going to do it. I don't really have to. And that's it. We get the win. Crazy, crazy win. A beautiful, sweet finish. And my opponent, Sparhawk2221, does not want to play game 2. So they go ahead and concede. Having beat the control deck that they're supposed to beat in the scenario that they're supposed to win in, right? The control deck that has played Standstill and has nothing going. They're supposed to beat that with their dredge deck, but I managed to win it anyway. That's how strong. If you're wondering why Shadow Spear is in the deck, like that's how insanely strong that card is. Probably you were not wondering why Shadow Spear is in the deck, but yeah, it's just an amazing card. So lovely, lovely deck. It's playing very well, quite enjoyable. Karn's on the button, but I think the tutor options with him and the what he does do is so strong that he probably sticks around. And then Recoil is, that kind of flex slot that we're playing with. And then the Meddling Mages, I think, probably have to stay. I currently don't have an answer for Argothian Enchantress, which is a problem. The answer is this. Oh, come on, shield. I need a shield. And specifically, I need a Shieldred's Edict, right? I need to be able to kill my opponent's creatures without targeting them. But the question would be, what would I do? Would I replace Meddling Mage with Shieldred's Edict and then make my deck, I don't know, kind of, or would I sideboard Shieldred's Edict? Like, would I sideboard it? Would I put it in the board? But if I do that, what do? Do I take out the ley lines? I kind of think that I need those. Disenchants? Nah, it doesn't make sense. So that's the problem I'm having right now. If that deck proves to be consistently, like, if it's popping up and I'm at a point where I'm willing to run the Edicts, I'll probably run a main. And at that point, I guess I would give up on the Karn and more than likely the Recoil. And I would just run 2 Shieldred's Edicts in their place and have a couple of solutions that I can do something with, and possibly sneak, because at that point the only card that I'd be leaving is the Cage. Like, if I'm really worried about that, the deck would look like this is what I think I would do, and then these 4 cards would just not be here. So this would be the main deck plus sideboard, and it's quite possible that this is a superior build. To be honest, there's a lot of aggro, and the fact that Shieldred's Edict also kills Planeswalkers is pretty nice. Maybe we just don't need the Karn. Maybe 4 disenchants is enough. I'm not sure, and I do like having access to the Recoil. But if you see the deck kind of go down this direction, don't be totally shocked if that's what ends up happening. But for now, we will keep our little thing that we've got going here as is, and see how things develop. But I'm interested in your comments. I'm interested in your thoughts. What do you believe? Should I go with the Shieldred's Edict main and board package and just run more creature removal in that sense, and then I'm not soft to untargetable things? Maybe I should. Or should I leave the Recoil in the main, and then I have answers for things like heavily enchanted lands with a bunch of like wild growths on a basic forest. I can just Recoil a forest and disenchant all the wild growths in a shot. Or having the Recoil to go with the Meddling Mage, the kind of synergy and interaction that it gives me there. Maybe that's better. What do you think? I look forward to your comments, and either way, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.